On this edition of Early Look, I'm going to be previewing the UFC 311 co-main event in the light heavyweight division between Jiri Prochazka and Jamahal Hill. My name is James Lynch. If you've never watched the show before, I'm going to go through a bunch of different stats, a bunch of different intangibles. Then at the end of this video, I'm going to give you my prediction for this fight. Some of this stuff may have relevance to you, it may not. I want to get your prediction on this fight in the comments. I want to hear from you. Let's have a discussion about this matchup. And like we always do, we're going to do a quick tail of the tape between these two fighters. BJP, Jiri Prochazka, 35-1. Jamahal Hill 12-2, so experience edge clearly going to Jiri Prochazka in this fight. 32 years old to 33, so not much of a difference in terms of the age. 6'3" to 6'4", 80 to 79. So if you look at it there, they're actually pretty close other than the experience in terms of physicality and height and reach and all that stuff. So that is one sort of interesting thing about this fight. But let's start first with the former, well, I guess they're both former light heavyweight champions, but let's start with Jiri Prochazka. And by the way, this is a 3-round fight, so not a 5-round. It should be a 5-round in my opinion, because the big implications for the winner here, I would imagine. And I did forget to mention, this is going to be taking place, where are we here? At the, is it Intuit Dome in Los Angeles, California. So big card. This is supposed to be, at the time of recording this, Islam and Arman. That's not officially done yet, but I'm assuming it's going to happen soon. Okay, let's get to Jiri. I mentioned it there. 35-1. He's got 26 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 1 decision. He's the former UFC light heavyweight champion. He's currently ranked number 2 in the light heavyweight division. He's 32 years old, 6'3" with an 80-inch reach. So he's 1 year younger and has a 1-inch reach advantage over Jamahal Hill. He's got fight of the night 2 times against Dominic Reyes and Glover Teixeira. He's got performance of the night 3 times against Volkan Ozdemir, Dominic Reyes, and Alexander Rakic. He's the first Czech champion in UFC history. He did not have an amateur debut, went straight to the pros in April of 2012, fought in Rizin. Like I mentioned there, he's the former champion there. Made his UFC debut in July of 2020 against Volkan Ozdemir. So it's been about 4 years that he's been in the UFC now, going to be 5 by the time he has this fight. And then he's 4-2 in the UFC, and he's got all of his wins are by stoppage, which is impressive. In fact, none of his fights have gone the distance in the UFC. His notable wins include Volkan Ozdemir, Dominic Reyes, Glover Teixeira, and Alexander Rakic, and he's only got 2 losses to Alex Pereira, was knocked out in both those fights. He's had a couple layoffs, though, they're worth mentioning in this fight. So going from Volkan to Dominic Reyes, there was a 295-day layoff. Going from Reyes to Glover, there was a 407-day layoff. That's when he got the injury, shoulder injury, and he had to... yeah, I believe that was when he had the shoulder injury, right? Yeah, no, yeah, that bout was rescheduled. And then going from Glover to Alex Pereira, there was a, actually, sorry, I take that back. The shoulder injury was after the Glover fight because he won the title there, obviously. So anyways, Reyes to Glover, 407 days. Going from Glover to Pereira, there was a 518-day layoff. That's when he did hurt his shoulder and he was out. That's why he vacated the title. And then going from Pereira to Rakic, there was a 154-day layoff. So not a quick turnaround. Well, I mean, it wasn't a quick turnaround, but not exactly a lot of time off, getting knocked out in that fight and then fighting Rakic in April. And then going from Rakic to Pereira, there wasn't much of a layoff there either, going from April to June. So he gets knocked out again. And then going from Pereira to Hill, there would be a 203-day layoff. So a few layoffs earlier in his career. And then maybe, if anything, you could say taking shorter fights in between. Has never gone the distance, like I mentioned. Hasn't had any major injuries other than the shoulder one, which would made him vacate his title. And if we look at the UFC stats for Prochazka, significant strikes landed per minute is 5.38. His striking accuracy is at 55%. His striking defense is at 39%. That's a key thing here because he does get hit a lot. Takedown average is 0.72. Takedown accuracy is at 60%. His takedown defense is at 68%. And his submission average is 0.2. And that's everything you need to know about Jiri Prochazka. Let's move along to his opponent, Jamahal Hill, who was the former champion, like I mentioned. They're both former champions. Big fight here, like I mentioned. Hill is 12-2. He's got 7 knockouts, doesn't have a single submission, and he's got 5 decisions. He's the former champion, like I mentioned. He's currently number 3 in the light heavyweight division. He's 33 years old, 6'4", with a 79-inch reach, so he's 1 inch taller than Jiri in this fight. He's a BJJ brown belt. He's the first UFC champion to come off Dana White's Contender Series. He's got performance of the night 2 times against Jimmy Crute and Johnny Walker. He's got fight of the night 2 times against Thiago Santos and Glover Teixeira. Made his amateur debut way back in January of 2016, so he started a bit later than Jiri. Made his pro debut a year later in September of 2017, so just had 1 amateur fight, that's it. And then made his UFC debut after winning on Contender Series in January of 2020. So not, like, think about it, he just made his pro debut in 2017. 3 years later, he's in the UFC. Hill is 6'2", with 6'2" with 1 no contest. That no contest coming against Abreu, that was the marijuana thing, I think, right? Yeah, failed drug test. That should also be a win. Hill really should be 13-2. not 12-2. But that's the whole marijuana discussion is a thing for another day. Some notable wins for Hill include Jimmy Crute, who at the time was 12-2, Johnny Walker, who's been ranked, Thiago Santos, who's ranked, Glover Teixeira, the former champ, that's what won him the title, and his losses are Paul Craig, where he broke his arm, and then the Alex Pereira loss in his last fight back in April, which I don't know if you guys saw that fight. Not many people are talking about it. Of course, I'm just kidding, because everyone's talking about that loss. That's like one of the main reasons why people don't like Jamahal Hill was after that fight. Hill's had a couple layoffs, obviously going from Teixeira to Alex Pereira. That's where he had to, in between there, that's where he had the knee injury. So there, that was a 448-day layoff. And then going from Pereira to Jiri, there's a 280-day layoff. So he's had two major injuries. He had the Achilles tendon injury from playing basketball back in July of 2023. That's where he had to vacate his belt. And then he was supposed to fight Carlos Ulberg. Actually, first he was supposed to fight Khalil Roundtree back at UFC 303. And then Roundtree's out of the fight because of that whole PED thing. And then he's supposed to fight Ulberg, and then he has a knee injury. So he's out of that fight. So that's a little bit of a concern. Two major injuries in the last little bit. Hill has decision wins like Glover, and he has one more here, Darko Stosic, but none of those fights were close. Hill clearly won the fight. And Hill's stats, let's get to them right here. 7.18. I mean, that's pretty incredible. You don't see numbers that high for significant strikes landed per minute. So 7.18. Striking accuracy is at 54%. Striking defense is at 46%, still higher than Jiri. And his takedown defense is at 73%. No takedowns or takedown accuracy or anything like that. He's mainly a stand-up fighter. We do have odds on this fight. I was able to find one book that has this. Right now, you can see that Jiri is the underdog at plus 110, and Jamahal Hill's the favorite at minus 130. But Tapology telling a different story, and I have a theory on this. Tapology has this very clearly for Jiri Prochazka at 68%, Jamahal Hill 32%, one of those rare occasions where the odds don't reflect what the public's thinking. And again, anyone can vote on this, so it doesn't matter. You're not betting money or anything to make your pick. So 68% of people thinking Jiri Prochazka is going to win. Okay. I don't think this is a huge surprise. I've talked about this fight a lot, even prior to doing an early look. My pick's not going to change. I'm going with Jamahal Hill in this fight by second round knockout. So a couple of reasons for that. First off, 67% of Hill's wins are by KO TKO. He's only gone the distance twice in 9 UFC fights. Jiri has a 39% striking defense. He gets hit a lot. Jamahal Hill, I think, is a more accurate striker here. Is he more powerful one? We'll find out in this fight. Hill has only been knocked out once in his career. That was against Alex Pereira. Yuri's been knocked out a couple times in his career. So the 2 times against Pereira, and then he was also knocked out in, he actually has 4 losses by knockout, where Hill just has the 1 knockout loss. So, thinking of sort of like a damage perspective, Yuri's definitely taken a lot more damage than Hill has. Remember, Jiri was also knocked out against Dominic Reyes, ended up finishing Reyes in that fight. So again, taking a lot of damage. Even the Vulcan fight, he took a bit of damage there too. And the other thing I think is important noting, because, people talk about Hill's win over Glover as, Hill's overrated because he beat an old Glover. I mean, there was only a year apart when these two fought. So Jiri fights Glover when Glover was 42. Hill fights Glover when he's 43. But if you watch the two fights, and again, MMA math isn't everything, but it is worth mentioning here. Jamahal Hill won every single round against Glover. Like, there was no question about that. He dominated the fight. He got the win. Jiri, I'd argue, was losing the fight against Hill. Jiri was losing the fight against Glover, ends up getting the finish in the 5th round. He doesn't get that finish. I'm pretty sure Glover Teixeira is still the champ. So that is one thing to consider. It's not the be-all, end-all. But then if you want to go the other way, Alex Pereira finishes, Alex Pereira finishes Jamahal Hill quicker than he finished Jiri Prochazka in the 2 fights as well. But so those are all worth mentioning. But I think the big thing here, what it really boils down to for me, is that Hill hasn't taken as much damage. Hill's only been knocked out the 1 time. Jiri's been knocked out 4 times. The only concern for Hill, like I said, is the injuries and the layoffs, but I will factor that in as not being as big of a factor as Jiri been knocked out 4 times and taking more damage. So that's kind of where I'm leaning. I think regardless, we're going to see a knockout. It is possible we see a decision as well, just because it is only a 3-round fight. That's another thing I forgot to mention here. This is the first 3-round fight for Jamahal Hill since December of 2021 when he fought Jimmy Crute. I mean, Hill, like I said, rarely goes the distance, but that is something interesting and worth noting as well. But yeah, I just think when it boils down to it, the simplest way possible, I think Jamahal is a better striker than Jiri Prochazka. And I think with Jiri getting hit so much and him taking so much damage, it's more likely Jamahal knocks out Jiri. Could Jiri knock out Hill? Absolutely. I'm not looking past what Jiri can do. Jiri's one of my favorite fighters to watch, but I just get concerned when I see him knocked out in 2 of his last 3 fights. And You look at Hill, he doesn't really get hit that much. I'd say his defense is a lot better. And even that's in the stats as well, 46% striking defense compared to 39. So with all that said, Jamahal Hill, second round knockout. I know it's not going to be a popular pick. And getting back to one last thing, this right here, this is not based off people picking that they think that Yuri's actually going to win. This is people who don't like Jamahal Hill. Because it's kind of odd to see the odds makers have Jamahal Hill as a slight favorite and it being more of an even fight, but this tells a different story. Keep in mind, this is one of those classic fights where fans don't like the fighter, so they're going to forget a lot of things that the fighter's done. And in the case of Hill, forgetting the knockouts over Jimmy Crude or Walker, or, again, like I think people don't like Jamahal Hill, and this is why a lot of people are picking Yuri. So that will play into the odds as well. In fact, I think if you're betting this fight and you're on my side of the pick, which is picking Jamahal Hill, I would wait closer to fight time, because I bet you anything the line's going to flip and Yuri's going to be the favorite simply because people don't like Jamahal Hill. I'm not saying Yuri can't win, but there is that bias from the fan base of people who don't like Hill from the way, he's been acting since the Pereira loss, to people just not liking his attitude, him going after Magomed Ankalaev. There's a lot of reasons. As far as who the bigger fan favorite is, that's Jiri Prochazka, and I think this represents a lot in how people are picking there. That's just my opinion. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Which way are you going on this fight? What's your prediction? I'm assuming most people are picking Yuri by knockout, but I'm going to go Jamahal Hill by knockout. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. My name is James Lynch. This is Early Look. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.